I titled this tonight, Addict, Malcontent, or Narcissist. And might seem like a strange title. Hopefully you're none of the three. But those three relate to where we left off in 1 John chapter 2, verse 15 and 16. And the addict, of course, relating to the lust of the flesh, the malcontent relating to the lust of the eyes, and the narcissist relating to the pride of life. And so I wanted to go through these, and I wanted to kind of expose the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life a little bit more, so that we can understand how those three areas work and see if any of them are predominant in our life. I think all of us have had all three working in our life at one time, but I think many times there's one of those three that are dominant in our fleshly, carnal life, and hopefully we're gaining the victory over that more and more, and we're being sanctified more and more. But remember what 1 John chapter 2, verse 15 says, "Love not the world, neither the things that are in the world." And you know, I would invite you to take 1 John 2:15 and just really meditate on that first sentence over and over again, not just tonight, but in the days going forward. Love not the world, neither the what? The things that are in the world. We've got a lot of things in this world, don't we? You know, sometimes I think it would have been a whole lot easier to live back in Abraham's day, where we just had a tent and maybe a rock to sit on and a blanket to pull over us at night. And, you know, wouldn't life be simpler if we didn't have TVs and jobs and cars and smartphones? And but all those things in the world are just clutter. And so we really have to work hard at clearing out the clutter. Now, if you can use a computer and if you can use a smartphone, say, to simplify your life or to make things more easier or convenient, then by all means, use it. But if it's just collecting stuff to collect stuff, and it's adding extra responsibility and unneeded confusion and complication to your life, get rid of it. You don't need it. And it's only sucking you into this world system more. So that's kind of a balance that we have to walk in. Don't love this world. Don't love the things that are in the world. For if any man love the world, the love of the Father is what? It's not in him. I think we may need to meditate on that a lot more too. Because I think, James says that if you are a friend of the world, you are what? The enemy of God. If we are truly called to be a Christian, the Christian life is not God making our life easier and problem-free in this world. That's not the Christian life. In fact, a lot of times it gets harder in this world, doesn't it? Just because you become a Christian doesn't mean the problems and the trials go away. A lot of times we get bigger problems and bigger trials by being a Christian. And so we've got to choose which world we want to live in. Colossians says to set your affections on things above, not on things on the earth. So if you want to be a Christian, you have to be willing to die to this earth, die to this world. You are to delight and set your affections on things above, not on things of this earth. So you and I really are to be strangers and pilgrims. In fact, Paul says it this way in Galatians. He says, I am crucified to this world. This world is dead to me. I don't find any life or pleasure or fulfillment in this world. And so as Christians, we can't be in love with this world. We can't be comfortable with this world. We can't be at home in this world. We're to be strangers and aliens, and our whole life, our world is supposed to be above the heavens. There was this great quote from this guy. He was back in the 1800s, and I don't know his name, but he said, only a fool will build his life under the skies. Isn't that a great thought? Meaning this, we are to build our life in heaven. We've been raised up and seated with Christ in heavenly places. We're to set our affections on things above. We're to lay up treasures where? In heaven. We're to build a life in heaven. We're not to be building a life here on the earth. And so, how is your earthly life doing? Hopefully, our earthly life is getting less and less complicated. Hopefully, we're getting freer and freer from this earthly life, and we truly are building our life in the heavenlies by the throne of God, because we have to make a choice. If you want to be a friend to this world, you are the enemy of God. And how much of the professed church today is all about improving your life here on earth? And how many of the messages that are being taught in churches today end up getting your life more entangled in this world system, not less entangled? That's the other passage, where Paul tells Timothy that if you want to be a good soldier of Jesus Christ, you don't allow yourself to become entangled in this world system. So there's a real choice of dying to this world that we have to make as a Christian. But what we gain, what we receive, is so much better than anything this world can offer. But the fact remains, if you love the world, then the love of the Father is not in you. You can't have both. You can't have a foot in both worlds. You have to choose. And so then he goes on and he says, for all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life is not of the Father, but is of the world. And those three lusts, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life, you and I have them in our flesh. And you know what? We can't control them. We don't have the power to. And it's something where we have to continually draw upon the power of God to resist and to live in victory over those three lusts, because those three lusts are continually, daily, trying to pull you down into this earth life. And so we have a very intimate connection with this earth life. And only the supernatural can break that intimate connection that we have with this earth life. Only by living by the power of the Holy Spirit. So let's talk about these three a little bit. The lust of the flesh. The lust of the flesh, where addiction comes from. You know what addiction is all about? You can read that paragraph if you want, but I'll talk to it just a little bit here. The power of addiction, when you're not in communion with God and when you're not in right relationship with God, it leaves a huge gaping wound and hole in your heart. And because God is our creator, and because he's the one that died for us, and it's to him that we will one day return and be judged, when you're not right with that God, there's just, you're empty, you're dead inside, you have no hope. That's where all of the depression and the discouragement comes, and nothing can satisfy that need in man or woman's heart except God. And so what do? If we don't fill our heart with God and turn to God, then we have to find something to pacify that pain in our heart, because we are miserable without God. And anybody who says they're not is lying. And so we have to do something to kill the pain, to deaden the pain in our heart. And so what do? We turn to pleasure, or we turn to whatever it is, drugs, alcohol, pleasure, amusement, entertainment, sports, money, career, the home in the perfect neighborhood, whatever it is, and we try to cover up that missing part in our heart that's killing us on the inside. We try to mask it over with just temporary relief, It's like having a big cancer in your body, and yet you take an aspirin to try to alleviate the pain, and just throwing an aspirin at cancer does nothing. It doesn't. It's not going to fix it, not going to heal it. It's not even really going to take away any of the pain. You're just masking over the problem a little bit, It's like your dog at home, messes on your living room rug, and instead of cleaning it up, you take some talcum powder and just sprinkle it. You're only covering up the problem. You're not fixing the problem. You're not cleansing the problem. And so that's what we do when we try to find some type of relief. In Ecclesiastes 2, if you remember what Solomon says in Ecclesiastes, he says, I went and I got me gardens and ponds and pools and women singers and men singers. And, you know, the list today would be a little bit different, right? I went and got me a Lamborghini, and I got me a mansion out in the hill, and I got me, you know, this $1 million job, and I won the lottery, and blah, blah, blah. You know, so that, the list that Solomon gives would be a little bit different in our day, but it's the same principle. And he says here, whatsoever my eyes desired, I kept not from them. I withheld not my heart from any joy. Any type of pleasure or amusement or whatever it was, any type of resource out in the world, I tried it, is what he's saying. And my heart rejoiced in all my labor. Have you all ever experienced that? You know, maybe you're saving up for that Lamborghini, or maybe you're saving up for that perfect house in the perfect neighborhood, or maybe you're, you know, working for that career, and you're just all excited, and man, as soon as I get it, I'm going to be so set for life, and I'm going to finally be happy as soon as I get it, and I work so hard, and your heart is rejoicing in all your labor, and then you get it, and what happens? It's like, is that it? You know, keeps your attention for like 5 minutes. I thought it would be a lot different than this. I thought it would actually make me happy. And you find out it does nothing to fill that hole in your heart that only God can fill. Then I looked on all the works that my hands had wrought, and on the labor that I had labored to do, and behold, all was vanity, meaning emptiness. I was just as dead after as I was before. I was just as empty. I was just as lonely. I was just as depressed after as I was before. I thought this vain amusement could take care of the problem, the pain in my heart, but it didn't. All was vanity and vexation of spirit, and you'll see it in the other translations. You all remember what vexation of spirit means? It means to chase after wind, to feed upon wind. Next time on a windy day, go out and try to catch the wind, see how far you get. That's how he's describing how vexing this is, how futile it is. It is futility to find your fulfillment in anything in this life. It is futility to live your life for anything in this earth. You know, the only thing worth living for in this earth life is Jesus and our family and friends. It really all boils down to relationship, doesn't it? That's the only thing. Take the car, take the home, take the job, take the money. As long as I have Jesus and my family and my friends, I'm okay, aren't I? But to live for anything else, it's emptiness, it's vanity, it's vexation of spirit. And he says there was no profit under the sun. All right, so that's the lust of the eyes, the lust of the flesh, excuse me. The lust of the flesh is that continual compulsion to try to cover up the sadness and the hopelessness in my heart. Decide to somehow try to dull the pain, to ease the depression. The lust of the eyes. I put there in your notes, the problem with the lust of the eyes is that with the eyes you see what you don't have. And that causes a lot of problems with us. Because, you know, what we see with our eyes, we think, oh, I need that, and I got to have that. And if I had that title in front of my name, then, you know, life would be good. Or if I had that person in my life, or if I had this amount of money in the bank, or if I, you know, and the list goes on and on and on. And it's what we see, and what we see ends up triggering the lust of the flesh. And so these two lusts work in tandem. But the lust of the flesh, you know, it kicks off, it initiates the lust of the eye, rather. It kicks off the lust of the flesh, because now I'm lusting, my flesh wants what my eyes are seeing, and we keep having to find more and more to try to cover up the pain, but then also we see what someone else has that we don't have, and now that makes us jealous and covetous, and they don't deserve that, I deserve that, and boy, I need to be better than they are, or I at least need to have what they have. And so now we have that rivalry going, that competition. And so the lust of the eyes causes a lot of problems. What Comes in through the eye gates. And I think next Thursday night we'll talk a little bit about how to deal with each of these three lusts, because the Bible gives specific guidance for how to deal with your flesh. And the Bible gives specific guidance for how to deal with your eyes, and it gives specific guidance about how to deal with your pride. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that next week. But look at all of the trouble the eyes can get you into. Genesis 3, verse 6. And when the woman saw that the tree was good for food. You see how what she saw, the lust of the eye, what she saw triggered the lust of the flesh? And she saw the food, and her flesh said, I've got to have that. And it was also pleasant to the eyes. It was a tree to be desired, to make one wise. And so now it kicks in the pride of life. What you take in through your eyes, you know that almost like nursery rhyme? Oh, be careful, little eyes, what you see. Is that how it goes? Boy, you need to be careful what you see. Ecclesiastes chapter 2, verse 10. Whatsoever my eyes desired, I kept not from them. Judges chapter 14, verse 2, speaking of Samson. Samson went to his father and his mother, and he said, I have seen a woman. Now therefore get her for me to wife. Psalms 119, 37, the psalmist prays, turn away my eyes from beholding vanity. Proverbs 23, verse 4, labor not to be rich, cease from your own wisdom. Wilt thou set thy eyes upon that which is not? You know, I think, boy, that's something we really need to remember. What I'm seeing with my eyes really does not exist. Oh, it may have substance, it may be tangible in this earth realm, but the fulfillment, the satisfaction does not exist. That will not bring me life, that will not bring me happiness. So will you really set your eyes upon that which is not? For riches certainly make themselves wings, they fly away as an eagle toward heaven. So it just really, you have to come to the place where you don't trust your eyes. You don't trust the appearance of things. You begin to learn that things are not as they appear. Things are not what they seem. Hell and destruction are never full, so the eyes of man are what? Boy, our eyes can get us into trouble. The eyes of man are never satisfied. We think we have to have everything we see. Everything that looks like it has promise. And there's nothing that has promise except Jesus Christ. And then this is a different take. You know, don't necessarily associate this with the lust of the eyes, because it's not. But I threw it in there just to give some balance to what we're saying. Ecclesiastes chapter 6, verse 9, better is the sight of the eyes than the wandering of the desire. You know what he's saying there? He's saying, look at what God has given you. It's better to rejoice in what you have and be content with what you have, with what you can see with your eyes, rather than the imagination of fantasy, of thinking, boy, if I could only have this, or if I could only have that. No, what God has blessed you with is a great blessing, and you need to be content with that, instead of your imagination always wandering off into some other pleasure that you think will gratify, because it never does. He says if your desire just kind of wanders here and wanders there from this into that, instead of being content with what you actually have, he said this also is vanity and vexation of spirit. The pride of life. We'll finish up with this. I put there narcissism. This is, this is a term that's, I'm not, maybe I just travel in the wrong circles. It seems to be rising in popularity lately. Maybe it's always been a popular expression, but you know, they actually now have a narcissistic personality disorder. And narcissism is really just being in love with yourself. It's an exceptional interest and admiration for yourself. I don't know if any of you caught it. Earlier this week, CNN had an article on, are you raising your child to be a narcissist? And it was interesting because even the world is picking up on the fact that we're raising our children to think too highly of themselves, to where they feel like they are entitled to certain rights and privileges. It talked about the fact that parents don't let their children fail anymore. You know, and all of the valuable lessons that you don't learn if you're not allowed to fail. And so even the world is beginning to grapple and can see that this is a real problem. But this narcissism, it's an inordinate and unhealthy preoccupation with yourself, really being self-absorbed. You have and we're talking about the pride of life, there's a warped and self-obsessed perspective of life. You know, it's always all about you. You're always the victim. You're always being persecuted. You never did anything wrong. And when certain events and circumstances happen, all you can see is how it affects you. Well, this is inconvenient for me. Well, this is hard for me. Well, I don't like this. And it's a very warped view of life and daily circumstances. You have an attitude of superiority and entitlement. I deserve better. If only we knew what we really deserved. I deserve better. I'm better than other people. You know, my last name is Miller, so that means obviously I'm better than most people. You know, that where you just expect a certain kind of treatment from other people. It's the attitude that strives and contends to maintain preeminence and dominance over others. These people are very manipulative people. They always have to be the focus and the center of attention. They always have to be the center of the conversation. They always have to be the life of the party. They always have to be in control of the situation and of the people surrounding them. They hate it when they can't control somebody. They're threatened by criticism, competition, and they're even threatened by simple disagreement. You know, a true narcissist, you can't disagree with them. They demand 100% unconditional agreement. You've got to agree that they're right about everything. And they're very threatened, especially by criticism, but they're threatened by any type of competition. You might walk in the room, you don't even have to pose any overt threat to them, but just by you being there and they know that you're skilled or gifted in a certain way, you suddenly become competition. And there's a tension in the relationship, a tension in the air. There's an insatiable compulsion for self-validation from self and from others. They surround themselves with people that sing their praises. And they always have to have that validation. You're great. There's no one like you. You're the Savior. Because of all of these bullet points, the last one, there's an inability to sympathize with someone else's needs or pain. These people are users. They just consume and use up people and their time and their money and their energies. And they use it on themselves. They expect to be served. I think a great example of this is found in 3 John concerning this one pastor. And unfortunately, pastors are very susceptible to this type of a spirit, to where they start to feel like they are a savior and a messiah to the congregation, to where they start to feel like the people belong to them, and that the people answer to them instead of answering to Jesus. And here the Apostle John encounters this problem in verse 9 where he says, I wrote unto the church, but Diotrephes, I trust I'm saying that close to right, this guy was the pastor in this church. He loves to have the preeminence among them. And what does he do? He receiveth us not. So he doesn't even receive other brothers and sisters. He believes that his church is better than other churches, that they are the spiritual elite, and they shut out outside influences. Why? Because they want to control the people and keep the people to themselves. Wherefore, if I come, I will remember his deeds which he doeth, prating against us with malicious words. They have to somehow find fault to discredit you, to discredit other believers, to keep out people that they can't control. They're afraid of losing who they do have. They're not content. Neither doth he himself receive the brethren, and he forbiddeth them that would, and casteth them out of the church. And so through this fear or intimidation of being cast out, he manipulates and keeps tight control over the congregation that he has. And that is a true example right from the scriptures of a narcissist and how they act and how they respond. So hopefully, as you go through this, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, the pride of life, everything that we talked about tonight, you can say is we kind of went to the extreme to kind of dress down these impulses, these carnal appetites, to try to make them a little bit easier to identify and understand. But these are the things that we have to watch out for in us, because all of us have these three carnal desires within us. And so next week we'll talk about how to live in victory over these three, because Jesus has given us the victory. But it's like Paul said, he said, I strive continually to keep under my body. This is something that we have to fight against every day, 24/7. And it's a real struggle, but we'll talk a little bit next week about the struggle. But I just wanted to expose some of these in our minds tonight to help us take a look at our life and our heart and see, is any of this popping up in me? Lust of the flesh, lust of the eyes, or the pride of life?